The Galactic Concord had gathered once again on the great orbital station Helios Prime, a shining ring of metal and light that floated above the swirling clouds of the gas giant Velos. Every 3 years, representatives from over 200 starfaring species came here to speak, to trade, and to keep the peace that had held since the end of the last war. At the heart of the station was the Grand Chamber, and at the center of that chamber stood the Unity Table, a massive, circular structure made of polished moonstone from the dead world of Ceres. It had no head, no foot, no place of honor. All seats were equal. That was the promise. This year, humanity sat at the table for only the third time. They were newcomers to the Concord, having achieved faster-than-light travel just over 2 centuries ago. Their first contact had been peaceful, their rise swift but quiet. They built ships, explored nearby systems, and asked few questions. When invited to join the Concord, they accepted without fanfare. Now their envoy, Daniel Brooks, sat calmly in his chair, hands folded on the smooth surface of the table. Beside him, xenolinguist Maya Patel adjusted the small translator pinned to her collar, her dark eyes scanning the chamber with quiet focus. The air hummed with low voices, clicks, whistles, and modulated tones as delegates from dozens of species exchanged greetings. The insectoid Zenthar clicked their mandibles in rhythm, a sign of respect. The gelatinous Mirans pulsed gently in their climate-controlled pods, their thoughts transmitted through soft light patterns. High Arbiter Kalorn of the Veln rose from his seat. Tall, scaled, and draped in silver robes, he carried the weight of the Concord's oldest surviving species. His voice, deep and resonant, filled the chamber through the universal translator. "Friends," he began, "we gather once more beneath the light of shared stars. The Kuiper expanse holds relics of our past, war drones left over from the Age of Shattering. These machines drift without purpose, yet they remain armed, dangerous. I propose a joint task force to locate and deactivate them before they awaken or fall into the wrong hands." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Drask, a reptilian species known for their military pride, nodded in agreement. The Orlani scholars, tall and slender with skin like polished bark, exchanged thoughtful glances. Most species saw the logic. The drones were a threat to all. Cooperation was the Concord's greatest strength. One by one, the delegates voiced their support. The Zenthar pledged engineering teams. The Mirans offered sensor arrays. Even the usually silent Qatari, whose faces were hidden behind smooth masks, gave a slow, deliberate nod. When it came time for humanity to speak, all eyes turned to Daniel Brooks. He stood slowly. He was not tall, not imposing, just a man in a simple gray suit with a small earth pin on his lapel. He looked around the chamber, not with defiance, but with something deeper, something unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice calm, clear and quiet enough that the translators had to amplify it slightly. "We decline." That was all. No explanation. No apology. No diplomatic phrasing. Just 2 words that cut through the chamber like a blade, before anyone could react. Before Kalorn could ask why, before the Drask could growl in outrage, Daniel turned to Maya. She stood without a word, gathering their data slates and personal devices. Together, they walked away from the Unity Table. Their footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor. The chamber fell utterly silent. Not a click, not a pulse, not a whisper. Even the ambient hum of the station seemed to pause. No species had ever done this. In over 5,000 years of the Concord's existence, no delegate had ever refused a proposal and walked out. To leave the table was not just rude, it was unthinkable. The Unity Table was sacred. It represented unity, trust, the fragile peace that held the galaxy together. To abandon it was to reject the very idea of shared fate. Daniel and Maya did not look back. They passed through the arched doorway and disappeared into the corridor beyond. Only then did the chamber erupt. The Drask slammed a clawed fist on the table. "Insolence," he hissed. "They mock us." Kalorn raised a hand for silence, but his scales had darkened with tension. "This is not mockery," he said slowly. "This is warning." The Mirans pulsed in rapid, anxious flashes. The Zenthar began chattering among themselves, their mandibles moving too fast for even their own translators to keep up. A young Orlanis delegate whispered to her elder, "Do they know something we do not?" Outside the Grand Chamber, Daniel and Maya walked briskly toward the human transport dock. Maya finally broke the silence. They're going to think we're planning something. Let them think, Daniel replied. Better they fear our silence than hear our truth. What truth? She asked, though she already knew. He didn't answer. They reached the airlock of the Aurora's Hope, a modest civilian vessel with faded white hull panels and a small Earth Alliance insignia near the cockpit. The ship's pilot, a retired naval officer named Carl, gave them a nod as they boarded. No questions. He'd been briefed. As the ship detached from Helios Prime and began its slow turn toward the Sol system, Maya looked out the viewport at the receding station. The Unity table was hidden deep within its core, but she could still feel its weight, its emptiness. 2 chairs now sat vacant in a room full of watchers. Back on Helios Prime, the summit continued, but the mood had shifted. Proposals were debated with suspicion. Old alliances were questioned. The Drask demanded a security review of all human activities in conquered space. The Mirans quietly pulled their data-sharing agreements. Even neutral species began to wonder. Had humanity discovered a flaw in the Conquered's foundation? Or worse, had they remembered something the rest of the galaxy had tried to forget? No one knew, and that was the most terrifying part. The galaxy had grown used to humans being predictable, cooperative, even humble. Now they had shown a side no one had seen. Quiet, resolute, and utterly unafraid to walk away. As the Aurora's Hope entered warp space, leaving the stars of Velos behind, Daniel finally spoke again. We're not leaving because we're angry, he said. We're leaving because we finally understand. Maya nodded. She had seen the encrypted files, the fragments of data recovered from the edge of Proxima space, files that shouldn't exist, files that pointed to a past humanity was never supposed to remember. The galaxy watched in horror, not because humans had done something violent, but because they had done something no one else dared. They had chosen truth over peace. And in doing so, they had shattered the illusion that had held the stars together for millennia. The table remained, but the balance was gone. And somewhere, in the quiet dark between worlds, humanity sailed home. Not as guests, but as ghosts of a history the galaxy had tried to bury. News of humanity's walkout spread faster than light itself. Within hours, every major hub in the Conquered knew what had happened on Helios Prime. Traders on Zenthar stopped mid-deal, their antennae twitching in alarm. Students on Orlanes paused their lessons to watch replays of the empty chairs at the Unity table. Even the deep space mining colonies, usually disconnected from galactic politics, received emergency bulletins. Humanity had left the table. No explanation. No warning, just silence. On the bustling trade moon of Keswick, a human merchant named Leo Grant was restocking his stall with Earth-grown coffee beans when the alert flashed across his wrist terminal. He froze. Around him, alien customers began to whisper. A Drask merchant nearby narrowed his eyes and slowly backed away. Leo felt the shift in the air, the sudden distance, the unspoken fear. He packed up his goods without a word and left. By nightfall, his stall was gone, cleared out by local security on safety grounds. He didn't argue. He just walked. Back on Earth, the world government said nothing. No press conferences. No official statements. The news network showed old footage of human diplomats smiling at past summits but offered no new commentary. People went to work, children went to school, and the cities hummed as usual. But beneath the surface, tension grew. Families checked emergency protocols. Scientists double-checked data vaults. Military outposts along the outer rim went to silent alert, not because they expected attack, but because they knew the galaxy would be watching. Meanwhile, aboard the Aurora's Hope, Daniel Brooks and Maya Patel drifted through quiet corridors. The ship was small, built for comfort, not speed. Carl, the pilot, kept to the cockpit, giving them space. Maya sat in the observation lounge, staring at the stars. She replayed the moment in the grand chamber over and over in her mind. The silence after they left, the way the Drask's tail had stiffened, the Mirren's sudden dimming. She knew what it meant. Fear, not of war, but of the unknown. Daniel joined her, holding 2 cups of rehydrated tea. He handed one to her. They'll try to make sense of it, he said. They always do. They think we're hiding something, Maya replied. We are, Daniel said simply. But not what they imagine. He didn't say more. They both knew the truth was too dangerous to speak aloud, even here. The files recovered from the derelict ship near Proxima Centauri were still being analyzed, but what they'd seen so far was enough to shake the foundation of human history. The ship was old, older than any humo, and its civilization, yet its DNA samples matched modern humans exactly. Its language fragments bore traces of Sanskrit, Sumerian, and even Proto-Indo-European roots. It shouldn't have existed, but it did. On Mars, in a sealed lab beneath the red dust of Olympus Mons, engineer Nina Foster stared at a holographic display showing the ship's internal layout. Beside her, Dr. Leo Grant, no relation to the merchant on Keswick, pointed to a section near the engine core. "This wasn't damage from battle," he said. "This was sabotage. Someone erased the logs on purpose." Nina zoomed in. "Look at the pattern. It's not random. It's systematic." Like they were trying to hide where the ship came from or who sent it. They had been working non-stop since the Pathfinder surveyor had found the wreck drifting near the edge of human space. At first they thought it was alien, but the moment the bioscanner confirmed human DNA, everything changed. Now, with humanity's sudden withdrawal from the Concorde, the pieces were starting to fit. Back in the galaxy, panic simmered. The Concord Emergency Council convened in secret. The Drask pushed for immediate surveillance of all human colonies. The Veln argued for restraint, but even Kalorn's voice carried doubt now. "Humans have never acted without reason," he told the council. "If they walked away, it means they no longer trust us. And if they no longer trust us, we must ask why." A young Mirran delegate, usually silent in such meetings, pulsed a soft blue light, their version of speaking up. What if they remembered? The light pattern translated. The chamber fell quiet. Remembered what? No one said it aloud, but the thought hung in the air like smoke. The Concord had archives older than most species. Some records were sealed, even from the High Arbiter. Rumors spoke of a great forgetting, a time when certain truths were buried to preserve peace. Could humanity have stumbled upon one of those truths? On the academic world of Orlanis, scholars began digging through restricted archives. They found fragments, mentions of a first wave, of a species that vanished before the Concorde was formed, of ruins on dead worlds that bore strange carvings resembling human faces. None of it was confirmed. All of it was classified, but now with humanity's silence echoing across the stars, even the oldest secrets felt fragile. Earth remained quiet. No ships launched. No signals sent. Just stillness. And that stillness terrified the galaxy more than any fleet ever could. Aboard the Aurora's Hope, Maya finally broke the silence between her and Daniel. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Daniel sipped his tea. "Not yet. They're too afraid of what they might find if they look too closely. They'll send spies," she said. "Let them," he replied. "Let them see our schools, our farms, our hospitals. Let them see that we're not building weapons. That's what will scare them most." Because the truth wasn't that humanity was preparing for war. The truth was far worse. Humanity had realized they didn't need to fight. They had remembered something the galaxy had spent millennia trying to forget. That once, long ago, humans hadn't needed the conquered to survive. They had built empires among the stars, then walked away from them. Not out of defeat, but by choice. Now they were choosing again. As the ship neared the edge of Sol system space, a priority message blinked on the comms panel. It was from Earth Central. Just 2 words, "Proceed home." Carl acknowledged the message and adjusted course. No fanfare, no escort, just a quiet return. On Zenthar, the human merchant Leo Grant boarded a freighter bound for neutral space. He left behind his stall, his license, his reputation. He didn't look back. On Orlanis, a scholar named Alira copied forbidden files onto a data crystal and slipped it into her robe. On Keswick, a Drask officer filed a report labeling humanity unpredictable and potentially existential, and in the grand chamber on Helios Prime, 2 chairs remained empty. Dust began to gather on their surfaces. No one dared move them. No one dared fill them. The galaxy watched, waited, wondered, but Earth gave no answers, only silence. And in that silence, fear grew, not of what humans might do, but of what they already knew. For the first time in centuries, the conquered felt small, and humanity, quiet and calm, felt vast. On Mars, deep beneath the rust-colored slopes of Olympus Mons, the research vault known as Site Theta hummed with quiet urgency. The walls were lined with magnetic shielding, The air filtered to near-perfect purity. Here, far from prying eyes and orbital scans, Dr. Leo Grant and engineer Nina Foster worked in near silence. Their only companions, the soft beeps of scanners and the low thrum of life support. Before them, suspended in a containment field, floated fragments of the derelict ship found near Proxima Centauri. It looked ancient, its hull pitted by cosmic dust, its corridors choked with frozen vapor. Yet every test confirmed the impossible. It was human, not just human-like. Not a distant cousin or a genetic echo. The DNA matched modern Earth samples with 99.98% accuracy. The bone fragments, the fabric remnants, even the rust on a child's toy found in what appeared to be a sleeping quarters, all pointed to one truth. Humans had been out there among the stars, long before warp drives, long before the first radio signal left Earth. Nina ran a gloved hand over a data slate, her brow furrowed. This log entry, it's fragmented, but I reconstructed part of it. Listen. She tapped a command. A voice, thin and distorted but unmistakably human, filled the chamber. Day 412, the Concorde ships are closing in. They say they're here to help, but they're erasing our memories. They're making us forget who we are. If anyone finds this, don't trust them. They made us forget. Leo stood very still. He had heard the recording before, but it still sent a chill through him. They didn't just find us, he said quietly. They reset us, Nina nodded. The Concorde didn't welcome humanity as new members. They let us in because they thought we were harmless. Because they believed we'd forgotten everything. Further analysis revealed more. The ship's navigation logs, though heavily corrupted, pointed to dozens of colony sites. Worlds now listed in Concorde records as uninhabited or lost to stellar collapse. But satellite images from old human probes showed ruins on those very worlds. Cities buried under sand, towers half swallowed by jungle, all bearing the same architectural style found in ancient Earth civilizations: Egyptian angles, Mesopotamian curves, Indus Valley symmetry. It wasn't coincidence. It was legacy. Leo and Nina compiled their findings into a single encrypted file. They didn't send it through regular channels. Instead, they carried it themselves to the Sol System Strategic Council, a small group of civilian and military leaders who met in a windowless room beneath Geneva. The council listened in silence as Leo presented the evidence. When he finished, no one spoke for a full minute. Then the chairwoman, a retired astrophysicist named Helen Cho, said only, "How certain are you?" "Certain enough to walk away from the table," Leo replied. That was all they needed to hear. Within hours, orders went out across human space. All diplomatic outposts were to shut down. All joint research projects with conquered species were suspended. All shared defense networks were to be severed by midnight Earth time. No violence, no threats. Just withdrawal. Clean, quiet, and complete. Back on Mars, Nina stared at the holographic map of human colonies now blinking red as they went dark to conquered sensors. "They'll think we're preparing for war," she said. "Let them," Leo answered. "But we're not preparing for war. We're preparing to remember." Meanwhile, on Earth, schools began teaching new lessons, old myths reframed as history. Children learned about star maps hidden in ancient temples, about constellations that matched ruins on distant worlds, about languages that shared roots with sounds found in alien ruins. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was pattern. And patterns, once seen, could not be unseen. In Chicago, Daniel Brooks stood before a university lecture hall, not as a diplomat now, but as a historian. He spoke of the Sumerian tablets that described gods from the sky, of the Dogon people's knowledge of Sirius B long before telescopes, of the Nazca lines that looked like landing strips from orbit. "We thought these were stories," he told his students. "But what if they were memories? Faint, broken, but real?" No one in the room laughed. They had all seen the empty chairs on the news. They had all felt the shift in the world. Aboard the Aurora's Hope, now docked in lunar orbit, Maya Patel reviewed intercepted Concorde communications. Most were panicked. Some were angry. But a few, very few, carried a different tone. A Mirren scientist had sent a private message to a human contact. "If you remember, tell us what we lost." And Orlani's archivist had leaked a fragment of a sealed record mentioning the first speakers, a term that appeared in no other Concorde text. Maya showed the messages to Daniel. "Some of them want to know the truth," she said. Then they'll have to earn it, he replied. Truth isn't given. It's reclaimed. On Mars, Leo and Nina made one final discovery. Buried in the derelict ship's core was a small crystalline drive, intact unlike the rest. When activated, it projected a star map, not of known space, not of conquered territories, but of a region beyond the galactic rim, marked with a single symbol, a circle with a line through it, the oldest known human symbol for home. Neither of them spoke as they stare. Yet they knew what it meant. Humanity hadn't just lived among the stars. They had come from them, and at some point they had chosen to return to Earth to start over, to forget. Until now, the Strategic Council met again. This time the decision was unanimous. Humanity would not fight. They would not hide. They would simply stop pretending. They would live as they were, neither subjects nor rulers, but rememberers. As night fell over Geneva, Helen Cho looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there the galaxy waited, watching, fearing, but Earth gave no signal. No message, just the quiet turning of a planet that had once walked among gods and chosen to become human again. And now, it was choosing to remember. In the vault beneath Olympus Mons, the derelict ship's fragments glowed faintly under UV light, as if whispering secrets only silence could carry. Nina turned off the lights before leaving, but the truth remained burning softly in the dark. Humanity had not been invited to the table as equals. They had been seated there as amnesiacs, watched closely, kept gentle. But memory is a stubborn thing. Once awakened, it cannot be put back to sleep. And so, with quiet resolve, humanity stepped away, not in anger, but in clarity. The galaxy watched in horror, not because humans had become dangerous, but because they had finally become themselves. The conquered did not wait long. Within weeks of humanity's silence, 3 Velen cruisers approached the edge of Sol system space. They came not with weapons charged, but with open comms and formal greetings. They asked for dialogue. They asked for explanation. Earth gave neither. The human defense grid, once integrated with conquered protocols, now operated on its own frequency. When the lead Velen ship hailed Mars control, the response was a single automated message. No entry. No contact. Return to your space. The cruisers lingered for 2 days. Sensors swept the inner system, looking for shipyards, for weapon signatures, for signs of rebellion. They found none. Only farms on Mars, research stations on Titan, and quiet cities on Earth. No fleets gathered. No factories churned out war machines. Just ordinary life, continuing as if the galaxy had not been turned upside down. Frustrated, the Velen withdrew. But others came. A Drask scout ship tried to slip past lunar sensors. It was detected instantly, tagged by silent drones and escorted out by 2 human freighters retrofitted with signal jammers. No shots were fired. No threats spoken. The freighters simply hovered beside the scout until it turned back. The message was clear. We see you. We don't fear you. Go home. Still, the galaxy watched, and still it feared. On Zenthar, human trade licenses were revoked. On Orlanus, human scholars were barred from archives. Even neutral worlds began to distance themselves not out of hostility, but out of self-preservation. To associate with humans now was to risk being labeled a threat by the conquered. Yet in the shadows something else stirred. Small acts of quiet curiosity. A Mirran scientist sent a data packet to a former human colleague. Just star charts, no message. An Orlani student left a note at a closed human cultural center. Tell us what you remember. But Earth remained silent. In Chicago, Daniel Brooks taught his history class as usual. He spoke of ancient migrations, of lost languages, of myths that mirrored star patterns. His students listened, not as children hearing stories, but as people piecing together a forgotten map. After class, a young man named Eli stayed behind. My grandmother used to say we came from the stars, he said. I thought she meant it like a dream. But now, do you think it's real? Daniel looked out the window at the city skyline. Real enough to make empires afraid of silence, he said. On Mars, Leo and Nina worked day and night. The crystalline drive from the derelict ship had revealed more than just a star map. Hidden within its structure were genetic markers. Human, yes, but also something else. Traces of adaptation to environments that didn't exist in known space. It suggested that early humans hadn't just traveled the stars, they had changed to survive them. And then, for reasons still unclear, they had returned to Earth, stripped away those changes, and begun again as if none of it had happened. Why would anyone do that? Nina asked one night, rubbing her tired eyes. Leo stared at the hologram of the ancient symbol, the circle with a line through it. Maybe they saw what the galaxy became, he said. Maybe they chose simplicity over power. Back on Earth, the Strategic Council made a quiet decision. They would not hide the truth. But they would not shout it either. Instead, they began broadcasting. Not messages, not demands, but signals. Simple, repeating pulses sent from every human world, every station, every ship. Each pulse carried the same phrase, translated into every known language of the conquered. We remember. The signals were not aggressive. They were not coded. They were just there, like a heartbeat echoing through the void. The effect was immediate. On Helios Prime, the Grand Chamber erupted. The Drask called it a declaration of war. The Veln argued it was a cry for help. The Mirrans pulsed in confused patterns, unable to decide if it was warning or invitation. But one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer playing by the rules of the table. They had stepped outside the game entirely. Panic spread. Some species began reviewing their own histories, digging through sealed archives, questioning elders. The Orlanis discovered records of a great silence that followed the founding of the conquered. Centuries with no records, no expansion, no contact. The Zenthar found old ship logs describing encounters with pale wanderers who spoke in riddles and vanished without trace. None of it proved anything, but all of it fit. Meanwhile, human ships began moving, not toward the conquered, but inward. Colonies on the edge of human space were quietly consolidated. Resources were redirected to Earth and Mars, not for war, but for preservation. Humanity was drawing its circle tighter, not out of fear, but out of focus. They were done explaining, done negotiating, done pretending. Aboard a Concord observation post near Neptune, a young Velin analyst named Tarek watched human activity on his screen. He saw no weapons, no aggression, just ships returning home, families reuniting, cities glowing with ordinary light. He turned to his commander. They're not preparing to fight, he said. They're preparing to be left alone. His commander didn't answer. But that night, Tarek sent a private message to an old human friend he hadn't contacted in years. Just 2 words. I believe you. On Earth, children played in parks under skies free of alien vessels. Farmers harvested crops under suns that had never known foreign flags. Scientists worked in labs with no outside oversight. It was peaceful. It was ordinary. And to the galaxy, that was the most terrifying thing of all. Because the conquered had always believed that peace required rules, that unity required compromise, that safety required control. But humanity had shown something else, that peace could also be born from truth, from memory, from the simple act of walking away. The galaxy watched in horror, not because humans had become monsters, but because they had become something the Concord could not control. Free. And in that freedom, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, as if finally remembering a song they had long forgotten. A full year passed since the 2 empty chairs appeared at the Unity table. Dust now coated their surfaces, untouched by cleaners who feared disturbing what had become a monument to uncertainty. The conquered still met, still debated, still traded, but the air in the Grand Chamber had changed. Every vote carried hesitation. Every alliance felt fragile. The silence from Sol system was not broken, yet it echoed louder than any speech. No human ship had entered conquered space. No human signal had been sent beyond the repeating phrase, "We remember." Yet that phrase haunted every species. It played in dreams, in data streams, in the quiet moments between stars. What did they remember? And why did it matter so much? On Earth, life continued in its steady rhythm. In Chicago, Daniel Brooks walked to campus each morning, nodding to neighbors, buying coffee from a street vendor who never asked about the galaxy. He taught history now, not diplomacy. His students no longer asked about treaties or trade routes. They asked about myths, about ancient maps, about why their ancestors might have chosen to forget. He never gave full answers. He only said, some truths are not given. They are lived. Maya Patel worked with Leo and Nina on Mars, piecing together more fragments from the derelict ship. They had found a child's drawing tucked inside a sealed compartment, crude lines showing a blue planet, a yellow sun, and stick figures holding hands beneath a sky full of stars. On the back in faded ink were the words, "Come home when you're ready." No date, no name. Just a message across time, from one human to another, across a gulf of forgotten centuries. They never spoke of war. They never built weapons, but they did something far more powerful. They remembered out loud. They shared stories with their children. They restored old songs that matched star patterns. They walked the deserts and mountains of Earth as if retracing steps from a dream. And in doing so, they showed the galaxy that memory was not a weapon. It was a choice. The conquered struggled to understand. The Drask demanded action, but even their war council grew quiet when scouts reported no military buildup in human space. The Veln sent quiet envoys to neutral worlds, asking if anyone had heard more from Earth. The Mirrans began broadcasting their own pulses. Not words, but lie. Shot patterns mimicking human brainwaves during deep memory recall. It was their way of saying, "We are trying to remember too." On Orlanes, the scholar Elira published a paper under a false name. It contained no proof, only questions. What if the first speakers were not myth? What if the Great Silence was not peace but erasure? The paper was banned within hours, but copies spread through underground networks. Students whispered about it in hallways. Elders frowned but did not deny it. Back on Earth, the Strategic Council met less often. There was little to decide. Humanity had made its choice. They would not return to the table, not because they hated the conquered, but because the table had been built on a lie. They had been seated there not as equals, but as amnesiacs, monitored, contained, and kept gentle. Now that they remembered who they were, they could not pretend anymore. One evening, Helen Cho stood on a hill outside Geneva, watching the sunset. A message had come that morning from a former conquered contact, a simple question. "Will you ever speak to us again?" She did not reply. Some silences were answers enough. In lunar orbit, the Aurora's Hope remained docked, its hull weathered but proud. Carl, the pilot, now taught navigation to young cadets at the Luna Academy. He never spoke of Helios Prime, but sometimes when students asked about the empty chairs, he would say, "They left because they finally saw the whole room." The galaxy watched, not with anger now, but with something softer, doubt. Species that had once mocked humanity's primitive ethics now wondered if those ethics had been born not of ignorance, but of wisdom. Restraint was easy when you forgot your power. True restraint came when you remembered it and chose not to use it. On Mars, Leo and Nina completed their final analysis. The derelict ship had not been fleeing war. It had been returning home. Its crew had known they would not survive the journey. But they had sent the ship anyway, like a message in a bottle tossed into an ocean of time. They had hoped someone someday would find it and remember, and someone had. Humanity did not seek revenge. They did not demand apologies. They simply stepped away and lived as they were, neither conquerors nor victims, but witnesses to a truth the galaxy had buried. In doing so, they forced every other species to ask, "What have we forgotten? And what might happen if we remember?" Years would pass before the first Concord species dared to follow humanity's example. A small Mirran research vessel would one day drift near the edge of the Kuiper expanse, not to deactivate war drones, but to listen, to look, to wonder. But that was later. For now, the Unity table remained incomplete. 2 chairs stayed empty, and the galaxy held its breath, not in fear of what humans might do, but in awe of what they had already done. They had chosen truth over peace, memory over comfort, and solitude over lies. And in that choice, they had not broken the galaxy. They had given it a chance to heal. On Earth, children played beneath open skies. Stars shone without borders. And somewhere in the quiet between heartbeats, the past and the future touched hands.